one. And welcome everybody to the very first monthly training session for 2025. I am really excited to be here with all of you. And I don't know what I was going to say. I don't know, but we're all here. It's all exciting. We're all going to get going. This is something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and that is using our performance management framework of Roma and looking at how we can use this information and this framework to really provide continuous improvement as we go through a lot of the planning processes that we're going to be looking at. So as we do this really quick, we're going to look at our FAST agenda. We're going to just really kind of skim over some data literacy basics. We're going to talk about some analysis. We're going to talk about what are we doing in terms of asking the right questions? And then we're going to apply those insights for continuous improvement through a case study that I'm going to share with you. So you can see how all of these pieces fall together and really can inform how we're going to move forward in our agency as we start planning. So let's take a look at our planning objectives. Again, we're just going to want to be able to leave here knowing how to identify and prioritize data points that is congruent and appropriate to your agency. We want to understand the basic principles of data, applying those techniques. We want to understand how these information points can inform our program improvement, and then develop an actual action plan based on the data analysis that we can actually do moving forward to make your agency more effective and more successful. And we also want to hopefully have you guys understand at the end of this that continuous improvement and data analysis, it has a very, very key role in driving organizational development. So let's take a look at this. So going in, and let me do this really quick. Just as an aside, I'm going to stop a couple of times to check in with you guys to see if you have any questions or comments. I might be asking you to relate a story of how you do this in your agency or how you might be able to apply that. But I wanted to let you know that you can always just raise your hand and I'll stop. If there's something that I need to clarify at that particular moment, let me know, or you can put it in the chat. And if you put it in the chat, Lindsay will let me know if there's something that I need to address immediately. So back to the presentation and moving and talking about this is last month in December, we spent a lot of time talking about what performance management is and why it's even important. Because good performance management leads our agencies to always looking at continuously improving what we're doing, or at least it should. But what does that actually mean? When we talk about practical applications of data and improving performance, how do we actually do that? So today I want to touch on some of that and then give you some things to think about as you're beginning to plan your services and strategies for program year 2026. Yep, we're already there. Because you have already, if it's not you specifically, your eligible entity has already submitted your funding applications to the state office, but planning for your funding cycle 2026 starts now with action planning documents, your mapping, and your community action plans, which are due in May 16th to be exact. So let's talk about why any of this matters. Hopefully by talking about this, this will give you some ideas and some ways that you're going to look at how you're going to provide and how your agency is going to provide services using data-driven decision making. So as a quick reminder, when we look at this graphic, it appears that all the benefits of making decisions based on data are not only beneficial to our program participants, but it really helps our agencies be better. Data-driven decision-making can help agencies make more accurate and effective strategic choices. It allows us to make decisions based on objective facts rather than, oh, my gut is telling me this, or our personal feelings, or in Roma, we talk a lot about assumptions. It helps us also to filter out some of our biases. And data-driven decision making can help us save money by making decisions that make our agency more effective and more efficient. And data-driven decision making can also help us continuously improve and move along that continuum of good, successful programming and makes us and helps us actually become innovative. And really, who doesn't want to be doing the very best work we can whenever we can? So where are we in Roma? So for those of you unfamiliar with Roma, that is the results-oriented management and accountability. And this is the cycle that we use to talk about performance management. So right now, and what we're going to talk about today, we're right here. We're in the evaluation phase. And when we think about evaluation, we're going to go back to the previous year to see, did we do what we said we were going to do, and what did that look like? We're going to go back and look at our last year's program data around services, around our outcomes, and around our budgets. What did we accomplish last year? And then we start asking ourselves questions. So if we start looking at those questions, and those of you that have already taken Roma, you will recognize this logic model. And our logic model is just a way of moving through how we plan. And our first column is identifying the need. Then we define what our outcome is going to be. And then we start talking about what services and strategies we're going to do. And then to be accountable, we start adding in those indicator numbers. But today, we're talking about column 5, right? This is our results. We don't populate this in our logic model until the very end of the program. Well, we're at the end of our program. We now have our results. And based on what we thought we would do, we want to evaluate how well we did. So throughout the full program year, there is a ton of data that we collect, right? Some of it matters, and honestly, some of it just doesn't. We do know that there are metrics that we collect because certain grants ask us to. We have some internal things that we want to know. We have external information that we want to know. And other people will tell us, excuse me, I lost my train of thought here for just a second. Internally, there are going to be things that we want to know as an agency and how we operate. External data is that data that we're providing to maybe some of our stakeholders, but we also collect demographic information. And these data points are typically built into our intakes or into our case management processes and interviews. And they might also be in our pre and post testing forms when we start setting our baseline data. We also collect information around our measurement tools. These are our copies of our check receipts. These are invoices or leases. We collect data from our budgets, service counts, achievement outcomes. Some of us use matrices to track the progress of our clients. And then some of us look at exit surveys and we follow up calls. That's a lot of data that we're looking at. So when we're collecting all this data, it becomes burdensome for people that are like, which of these data points are important? How do I know what is important and how I want to take that information out of all that information and really look at how I'm going to evaluate? And with that much data, we have to move it into a place that's actually usable. So we need to move it into information and knowledge. So we bring all that raw data elements that I just talked about, and we have to bring them into one space where we can be integrated or aggregated. It can be a bunch of numbers, it can be a bunch of words, but there is a difference between raw data, information, and knowledge. So the data, these are facts that are observed, measured, collected, and then we put them all together. But data only becomes information for decision making once it's been analyzed in some fashion. And then knowledge is derived from the interaction of information and experience with a topic. So let's look at an example of this. So for example, the height of Mount Everest is a piece of available data. This height can be recorded precisely and it's going to be entered into a database, or it can be entered into a database. Well, other data elements might be the location, such as the longitude and latitude on a map, the temperature, or perhaps a range of temperatures, and identification or mapping of the terrain. And all of this data may be saved in a database or a chart, possibly combined with other data on Mount Everest. Well, these data elements are then put together and they're aggregated and compared in such a way that they start providing information about the mountain that would be useful for those who wish to make a decision about the best method or way to climb it. And using this information, coupled with experience with climbing mountains in general, persons seeking to reach Mount Everest peak might be seen as having knowledge about the subject. But just remember, this is an example of raw data is not useful until it's compiled or it's analyzed. So let's look at another way. When we start looking about the relationship between our data and information, we can establish a larger chain. This is called the DIKW pyramid, and that stands for data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And it describes the hierarchy between all four of these things. So in this pyramid, it describes the acquisition of data, its processing, its retention, and its interpretation. And it's as applicable to businesses as it is the human brain. This is just how we process information in our brain. So a good example of this one is the tomato example. So the data tells me there's one item here. Knowledge tells me that that item is a tomato and that tomato is a fruit. But wisdom tells me that I don't put tomatoes in fruit salads because I know that through experience or other knowledge pieces that it may be a fruit, but it doesn't go into a fruit salad. The other thing that we want to take a look at, because we have so much data to choose from, is that we first need to understand what data points we're collecting and then which one of those data points are going to help us gain knowledge or wisdom or be able to tell the story we want to tell. So we have to start narrowing down those data points that are useful for us. So in human services, KPIs or key performance indicators are things that are measurable, that are going to reflect the effectiveness and efficiency of programs and services. And they really help agencies track progress toward their goals, identify areas of improvement, and then gives us the ability to demonstrate that impact to funders and stakeholders. So there's a few data points that most human service agencies are going to look at. So let's start with client outcomes and program reach, right? So this is going to look like things like we're going to start tracking the number of individuals who transitioned from homelessness to stable housing. Really important data point if you're working with HUD or if you're working with funding that asks you to address homelessness. We might track employment rates. We might track the number of meals that we serve or the number of households that received food assistance. We might be looking at housing stability or improved health outcomes, or maybe it's client satisfaction. The other thing that we want to look at here is the number of clients we served, the number of households we reached, and probably the geographic reach within that service area. Another KPI topic or theme that we want to look at is our operational efficiency. So we want to look at our client to staff ratio. That might be an important KPI because we really want to look at the number of clients that are able to be served per staff member. Or maybe this is our program cost per client. How much does it cost us to serve one client? What does it cost us to open the doors? And how do we know what the cost of our services through case management are going to be? We want to track some of those numbers. We might want to track volunteer hours to see how we're leveraging volunteers to help us provide services in the community. And then we also want to know, are we efficient in the use of our resources? Are we spending more money in food than what is reasonable? We want to be able to track that. And then that kind of ties into our financial sustainability. piece, right? So that could look like tracking our fundraising revenue. Maybe that's the KPI that we want to look at, or our donor retention rates. For those of you that work in development, donor retention rates are really important because that's the percentage of donors that continue to financially support that agency. And then for other financial sustainability, maybe we want to develop some KPIs around our cost of effectiveness. So looking at our ratio of program cost to program outcomes. That looks like, hey, I really want to know what it actually costs our agency in hard costs and soft costs to keep a family from being evicted. And then finally, we want to look at what may be our fourth topic of where we want to align our KPIs. And this could be in our impact in the community, our partnerships, the number of partnerships we have. How strong are those partnerships? We might want to take a look at our community awareness. Does everybody in our service area really truly know about our services and our programs? And are our partnerships in our community, are they effective and are they helpful for us? So now that we've taken the time to kind of look at all the data points that we're looking at, we've identified them. We're going to have to look at these because we need to put them in a format that's allowing us to actually make decisions about it. So we have to look at some analysis, and really data can be super complex. Seriously, you could go get your doctorate in data analysis, and it can take some really specific skills and training to do it properly and in depth. But it doesn't have to be that way at the basic level. So this slide is really showing us examples of 4 basic techniques that can be done with pretty minimal difficulty, and it should be within the skill level of any typical community action agency staff member. So we want to look at aggregating it. We consider the type of data, how we're going to put it together, bring it in one place that we can actually do something with it. Sometimes this is an Excel data sheet. Maybe it's a graph. In CAP 60, we aggregate our outcomes, our services, and our demographics in different parts of that next gen report. It aggregates it for us. And then we start counting. How many people actually live in a certain area? How many people live in our program area? What have we defined that? How many of certain characteristics are there? Like how many people are under the age of 5? How many people are over the age of 65? What is their income? What is their job employment? We'll want to take a look at their status of housing or employment services. And we're just counting, right? And once we've counted, we now can compare. So some of the questions you can ask to where are you seeing the largest numbers? Is there a particular place in your service area that you're seeing more people come from than another? Do you see a change in demographics of our participants? Did anything change from last year? Is it bigger? Is it smaller? One that we look at that I like to look at a lot is our American Community Survey, right? If it says that there are 3,000 people in our community who are eligible for SNAP benefits, but yet only 200 of them are actually registered, that's a huge data point that's telling me something really important about food insecurity in my community. So we want to start looking and comparing some of these numbers, and this can really lead us to an identification of a trend. And once we start seeing trends, now we can start prioritizing something that's getting to be a larger need, or maybe reduce the priority of something that seems to be a smaller need. But how do we know what we want to know? So I mentioned that we need to start asking questions of our data. And here are some suggestions that you might find helpful. And I'm going to say that once you start asking questions of your data and looking deeper into your outcomes and your services, hopefully more and more questions are going to start to appear. And if they don't, well, then that should raise even more questions. So consider these questions. Did we do what we said we were going to do? Did we serve the population we thought we were going to serve? How do we budget for what we want to do? And as we start asking these types of questions, we want to keep a couple of things in mind about the questions and the type of questions that we're asking, because we want to make sure that we're crafting the right questions. So some strategies that you want to keep in mind, whoops, let me go back one, are making sure that the questions are actually aligned with your organizational goals, right? If you're asking about food insecurity and your organization doesn't run a food pantry or work with food insecurity, then that may not be the right questions and the right KPIs that we want to start setting up. We also want to make sure that the questions we're asking are smart questions, right? So are they specific? Are they measurable? And then we also want to consider the audience that we're reporting to. Reporting to the feds about a federal grant that you're working on is going to lead to different questions than if you were reporting back to your community about the specific impacts that your agency is doing in your community. But at the end of the day, what's important to you? Because each agency is going to have a different answer to this question. Some of you are going to want to know, who weren't you serving? Who were you not able to help? How many people did you have to turn away? Some of us are going to want to know, what population's not coming to my agency that should be? Are we making a community difference? Are we meeting the goals of the CSBG grant by only providing family and individual services? How are my community partnerships working? Each one of those questions really requires an intentional thought process to determine what metrics you're going to measure and what you're going to ask questions about. And I want to make a point here. You have to know which grant is giving your agency an idea of what kind of reporting requirements they want. HUD is going to want to know different things than HRSA is, or CSBG is going to want to know. So boards and leadership staff need to be spending a lot of time considering how to manage all of the external requirements, and then also balance that with the internal need for understanding how our agency is performing and whether or not that's sustainable over time, or if it offers good insight on how to improve. And this is not easy. This is hard. It takes a lot of planning. And I say that to say this network, CSNO, or Community Services Network of Wyoming, can come into your agency and help you with that. We can help you have facilitated conversations around consensus workshops and understanding we as a whole, this is not a strategic plan, but really action steps about how we're going to choose to use our data to make it more important to us. So just let me know. You can reach out to me at any time and we can show you how to do that. But now it's your turn. Does anybody here want to share any examples of how your agency analyzes your data now? Like, do you guys have a formal process for it, or does it happen on an organic level as situations arise? And I invite you to come off a mute really quick and say, you know what? We're really not analyzing as much information as we would like to, or yeah, we're doing a really great job around this. So I'm going to put myself on mute for a second and invite anybody to come in and talk about if you would like to share how your agency is doing that. Oh, we've got some shy people in here. Oh, Doug, you're here. I'm going to let you go.
Oh, I'm always good for a chat, right? Um, here in Fremont County, because we have so many different things going on, as changing from having sub-grantees to doing direct services in-house, essentially we're looking at all of our data, whether that's tracking who our clients are, who the clients in the community could or should be, as well as expenditures and what services are getting money, what's not, and this, that, and the other. Um, I think I think along the lines of, as opposed to how we do it, we're looking at all the metrics involved with our change to long-term case management, a 12-month self-sufficiency program. And the real key to us, and I think to any quality data program, is not only just knowing what you're focusing on, but now that you have all this raw data, what do you do with it? Because if I just take raw data to my board and to other people, they look at it and they're like, okay, what does any of this mean? So taking the data one step further from the executive level, because I know what it means inherently, I see the numbers of what's our target, who's coming in, who's not coming in, what are their demographics, and where do they come from. But everybody else involved with our program and organization doesn't have the time to look at that material in the same manner that I do. So I need to step back as an executive of this program and take that raw data, or find somebody within the organization who can take that raw data and essentially put it in layman's terms for people to actually analyze and give input on.
Exactly. And that is part of your planning process, right? How do you know that it's easy for us and this is part of that knowledge part. We have specific knowledge around what we're trying to achieve, but we don't always speak the same language as our stakeholders in our community, particularly around funding opportunities. Earlier, I mentioned like this is something CAP-NC in Natrona County does a lot, is they keep really good records around those individuals they were not able to help. And that is helpful for future funding proposals, right? It's like, man, I can only serve 150 people here, but if I had more money, based on the knowledge I know about my community, there's 300 people that need our assistance. And with your help, you can help us reach more people and make a bigger difference. And those are those storytelling pieces, or turning that information into knowledge so you can share that information in your community, that helps you build your case for why you exist. And those can be really important. We call those gap analysis a lot, right? What are we not able to do and why? And is it important for us to do so? Is there anybody else that wants to talk about what you guys know about your agencies and what you're doing to address some of those storytelling or data points that you're looking at to inform how you move forward with your agencies or your services? Okay, well then in that case, I'm gonna give you a chance right here really quickly. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, any pushback about what we've talked about so far that you want me to go back and clarify or add on to before we move on to our application of these actual insights? Okay, not hearing anything. We'll go ahead and move on. Um, okay, so this is what we've done so far. We've gathered our data, we've analyzed it, we asked our questions, and we have a pretty good understanding of what is going on. Well, now we need to start applying our knowledge that we talked about and look at ways that we can actually change or adapt what we're doing. So some of those steps that we need to do to take care of that include identifying actionable steps, right? We got to be like, all right, well, we know what's happening, but now we're going to have to actually put this into a step-by-step plan that we can make changes with. We want to make sure that we can implement any of these changes in programs or processes, right? We're going to take a look at this data and say, wow, you know, there seems to be a problem with people being able to access our parent education class that we're having at 7 o'clock at night. And when I reached out to them to ask why they were able to complete the program, I consistently was hearing childcare was an issue. So, can I take that information and make a change in my program or my processes around that particular service? Maybe that means I change the time of it so more people can attend during school hours. Or maybe we look at this and say, oh, in order for people to come here to these parent education classes, we're going to need to provide them with childcare. So we need to be able to have something that we can actually implement. And then we want to be able to monitor that. We got to watch those outcomes. And then we can just keep refining our strategies as we need to. And the key benefits of that means that we're going to be looking at our quality of services. We're going to be able to allocate our resources efficiently. And hopefully, our ultimate goal is better client outcomes. Because when they do well and they have great outcomes, that means that we're making a difference in the lives of the people who live here. So let's take a look at what making a data-driven decision can look like at a typical community action agency. We're going to run through a really quick example of an agency who did this work, and we're going to do this through using housing services and strategies. So the first thing that they did in our first step is we got to collect the data, right? So our agency that we're looking at collected data from various sources, including all of their applications for rent assistance. They looked at the demographics. They looked at income levels. They looked at the reason for the hardship and why they weren't able to make rent or why they needed rental assistance. They then took a look at some program performance metrics, like how many people did we actually serve and what was our average assistance amount. So they were like, one, we provided 100 rent checks. We averaged about $750 a check. But they also went deeper into that and they looked at their community data. They wanted to look at what are the eviction rates that are happening in their community? What are the unemployment rates? Are there housing cost trends that they're looking at? And a couple of months ago, we talked about all these different resources and places you can go to get this information. If you didn't get a chance to see that, you can go onto our YouTube channel and find the video so you can find out where you can get more of this community data. Well, then they had to analyze it, right? Again, we had to compare, we had to look at trends. So they analyzed their applications over time to identify peaks in demand. Like, when were most of the applications coming in? Was it at the start of the month, or were there seasonal layoffs that were happening in their community? And then they compared that information with approval rates by region or by neighborhood to look at and say, are we identifying where our underserved neighborhoods are located? And then you have to also look at your outliers because we needed to know, we got to take out the extremes, right? So we want to really start looking at our averages or our means, our medians. We noticed by looking at our data analysis that we saw a significant number of repeat applicants in some very specific areas. So that was starting to suggest that maybe there were some deeper systemic issues like an actual lack of affordable housing. Maybe by looking at our data and looking at where the requests were and the applications were coming in from, we were able to look at that area and say, oh no, well, no wonder there's not enough housing to go around. And then we have to ask the right questions again. So in this case, this agency took a look at the demographics and they were like, oh, wait, which one of these groups is showing us that they're most in need of rental assistance? Is it seniors? Is it single parents? Is it those that are living in a completely isolated area of our service community? And then we wanted to look at, are we distributing these funds equitably across regions and our demographics? Or are we seeing key points that are coming out that's like, wow, we are really serving a lot of single parents in this particular neighborhood? That's important information to have because now we want to look at how can the agency reduce some of these repeat applications and start addressing the root causes of housing instability. And then they start looking at decisions that they need to make. Because of their analysis, this agency was able to implement some of the following changes. They prioritized where their funding was going to go. They shifted resources to areas that had a higher eviction rate and also had a traditionally or identified underserved population. They looked at their application process. They simplified this process for first-time applicants and then recreated targeted outreach programs for those marginalized communities. And then they said, oh, we need some help. We need some help. It's not just about rental assistance. We need to bring in some partners here that are going to be able to address some of the things we can't address. So they partnered with a local job training and financial literacy program to address some of the underlying causes of the financial instability. Was it that they didn't have the job skills necessary to get higher paying jobs, which would make their which would ease some of their housing instability? And then they looked at some performance monitoring because they established some key performance indicators or key KPIs like eviction prevention rate, average time to process applications, and they took a look at their client satisfaction and their client outcomes. But then don't forget this point, because we still have to monitor this. We have to keep looking at all of the decisions we made to make sure that we're on the right path. So they conducted quarterly reviews of program performance using this new updated data and compared it to what used to be. They adjusted their allocation models based on real-time application trends and client feedback, and they wanted to pilot new initiatives. In this particular case, this agency set up a program with a flexible repayment plan for those individuals who needed longer-term support. So what does that mean? At the end, there are some outcomes that they achieved. By tracking this data, they recognized that in the first year, they were able to reduce eviction rates in target neighborhoods by 20%. We know that they improved their client satisfaction scores by 15%, as evidenced by post-service surveys. They decreased application time by 30% because they streamlined their operations, making the process easier for applicants to fill out the application and moved this process along a little bit faster. And they expanded partnerships to address systemic issues, leading to fewer repeat applications. And in CSBG language, what does that mean? They started looking at community initiatives. Were there community initiatives like job training programs or building or helping a coalition begin to start building more affordable housing options? They started to see fewer repay applications. And this example really demonstrates how leveraging data can help community action agencies maximize their impact, optimize their resources, and better serve their communities. So let me know here in the chat or by taking yourself off of mute. Let me know if there's an area in this particular slide that you want me to talk about in a little bit more depth. The problem with only having 45 minutes to an hour to do a training like this is that you're just getting a really brief overview and you don't get into the details of the how-tos to do this. But I think by looking at this slide, this gives you a process in which to work through. These are the steps we're going to take to analyze our data to get into continuous improvement. Any questions?
So I guess one of the only questions that I really think about and go into on those slides, or one of my bigger questions, is revolves around asking the right questions. Not necessarily because I don't have all the right questions, but in the same context, when I bring it to a board or to other people, they can get very detracted from the data and the topics because they're not used to delving into it. And so is there a process, is there a step, is there a place to find better questions?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, these are very agency specific questions that you're going to want to ask based on what you want to achieve, right? So we're looking at this particular case study as just housing. But you're absolutely right. And the first thing you go to is your mission statement. You're going to look at your mission statement and you're going to be like, what are we trying to achieve here? And then while a lot of people find logic models difficult to navigate or difficult to kind of work, I invite you to take a look at your at a logic model again on maybe just a really simple thing that you want to analyze. And that is looking at what the need is. What do I need to know specifically? And what do I want to have occur at the very end? What do I want my outcome to be? And then you reverse engineer it, right? So if I want it to look like this at the very end, what are some things that I'm going to need to know to be able to prove or to be able to demonstrate that I met that outcome? So in this particular one, they looked at three questions that they wanted to know. Are we serving the people that we said we were going to serve or what we expected to serve? Um, how long did it take them to get the application and get through the process? And what did we need to do in our community to reduce the overall number of people who had that need? And those are questions because they reverse engineered. They wanted to know, how can we do this better? We want to reduce eviction rates. Okay, well, if we're going to reduce eviction rates, then we have to go back and decide, how are we going to know if we did that? And that's going to start pointing out those data points that you want to start. And then when you start asking the questions and facilitating that discussion in a board meeting, that can become difficult if you don't have a really good handle on navigating the data. So with boards in particular, Doug, what I've done in the past is I don't give them a ton of information. We work a lot on dashboards. And we address a lot of these in our mission statement, our community action plan, and our strategic plan, right? What do we want to do? I remember when I was with Compass Center for Families, and one of our strategic directions in our strategic plan was we want to become the preferred referral provider in Sheridan. We wanted us to be the trusted person who agencies felt safe making referrals to. And so when we did that, we had to identify, how are we going to know when we get there? And that was tracking the number of referrals that we received and the outcome of those referrals. So we did that with a basic demographic thing first, a basic demographic. These are the people we know are qualified for our services in our community. And these are who our referral partners are now. Who do they want them to be, and how do we want to respond to those? And so, again, very specific to the agency, but with boards, I particularly with boards, narrow down some of the pertinent information into a dashboard or a visual format because it just seems to be a little bit easier for them to grasp. The same is true when we start talking about fiscal reports to boards. Many of our boards don't have the fiscal background or bookkeeping or finance background to really truly understand what a P&L looks like. So a lot of times we just put those into graphic forms as a simple compare and contrast of where we are and where we have been in the past. Another thing that helps, Doug, is using your defined benchmarks. And you can set up a defined benchmark. We talk about this in Roma all the time, where we have the stable to thriving to in crisis, is you can set up a benchmark for anything that says, okay, what does thriving look like in our agency for employee healthcare benefits? And then you can start narrowing down what data points and what questions you want to ask by reverse engineering that. It's hard for me to specifically answer that question because, like I said, every agency is different. If I were to sit down with you and we wanted to come up with several questions that we wanted to ask, we would spend a lot of time in that. So you would feel more comfortable going to your board with some pre-planned questions that they want to consider. I know that's not helpful. It's a long about answer to say it really depends.
So what I hear you saying is that executives, we need to have a specific target, whether that's in an NPI or a demographic or within budgeting, to be able to revolve those questions around to seek out. So
Absolutely.
we have to have pertinent quality data that we're targeting to make sure that we're asking the right questions.
You just said a really key word here that I want to come back to, and that's quality data, and that's really important. But that's what the Roma says, right? You have to have outcome indicators. It's not just enough to say you want to eradicate poverty in your community. You have to have very specific numbers that say, I'm going to serve 150 people, and of those, 75% of them are going to be successful in achieving that outcome. And that is part of the process. But I do want to talk about the words you just said about quality data really, really quickly. And we talk about this in another video that's on our YouTube page. It's critical that you have good data to work from. If you don't trust your data because there are typos in it, or there are multiple cases set up for one client because their middle name was spelled differently, or there are outliers, and we addressed this a little bit, looking at your outliers, it's like, wait a second. That doesn't make sense to what I know to be true. You do have to go in and clean your data, and I cannot overstate that enough. One of the things that we're doing with our Wyoming data project is these exact things, and we'll be giving people specific questions that you should be asking about your data, right? But again, that does go back to an individual agency and what you're trying to achieve. Anybody else have any questions about this process? Okay, so what did we learn today? We learned that data literacy is foundation. It's foundational to everything we do in our decision-making processes. Data literacy is only the thing that matters is like, you know what data is, you know how to collect it, you know where to store it, you know who's going to be aggregating it, you know how to count it, you know how to analyze it. Those are very specific skill sets that a lot of people need to do it, to work on and to learn. And we're working towards having a manual for everybody to look at as they go through and learn about improving their data literacy at their agency. We know that analytical techniques are going to uncover patterns, trends, and opportunities, but you have to be curious. You have to be curious about the data. You have to have a part of yourself that is like, well, why is that happening? Why does it look the way it does? We want to make sure that we're asking the right questions so we can focus on what's important and relevant to what we're trying to cover. And that's what Doug and I just were talking about. How do you know what the right questions are? Well, that takes time. It takes thoughtfulness. It takes strategic thinking to figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to get there, and how are you going to measure it. And then we also know that continuous improvement relies on applying these insights effectively. If we just keep doing what we've always done, you're always going to get what you always got, right? Everybody knows that saying. If we're not willing to be brave and to look at our data in a way that says, hey, maybe we're not perfect. Maybe there are ways that we can improve. Just doing what you've always done is not moving the needle. It is not changing lives like CSBG is asking us to do because things change, people change, agencies change, skill sets change. So you always want to be able to have that natural curiosity and the courage to look at data to say, is this just working because I think this is working? Or what is the data actually telling you? So my call to action for you guys today is start small with something. Pick one area in your agency, something that you have control over, and look at it and analyze it and look at ways that you can improve a process. And maybe that's just something that happens within your office or within your cubicle, or maybe a little piece of information that you're working on. Start identifying what you want to accomplish, what data points you're going to use to measure it, analyze it, and then put an action step in place for you to address it. It doesn't have to be agency transformation. It can be something really small, like what kind of snacks are we offering in our break room? Start there. Use some of that and build the skills that you have to learn. The other thing that I urge you to do is get comfortable with using AI. You can use ChatGPT to analyze data. You can put in a spreadsheet and say, help me analyze where the most of my, you can upload a spreadsheet of where your applications are coming from. Ask ChatGPT or Gemini, analyze this and tell me where most of my applications are coming from. Is it in a particular neighborhood? It can do that for you. It can also start giving you prompt questions that might be appropriate for the answers that you're trying to get. So putting into ChatGPT, hey, if I am wanting to know more about food insecurity in my agency and how we're responding to that, what are some sample questions I might want to ask myself? And poof, AI is going to generate some questions about you might want to use as you move forward. So again, I urge you or invite you, start small. Pick one little thing in your agency that you're like, I'm just going to do a test cycle on this to see what happens. So you're all going to get a copy of this slide deck because I also included resources and other learning opportunities that you might find interesting. On this slide, I have a couple of things. I use the Khan Academy, the Khan Academy a lot for my high schooler in science. It helps kind of visualize some videos that help him around physics. You can do the same thing around measurement and data. You can take a look at problem solving using data analysis. You can look at using plot data to find out how your frequency is working in your agency. I put another one in there. It's a blog about the role of data in continuous improvement. Use Google it all the time. It's like, what are best practices in analyzing data for continuous improvement? Those are some things that are available to you that will help you really learn better. Eventually, and Lindsay, I don't mean to put you on the spot, Lindsay, but I think the deadline for when we're going to have a data literacy or building your data culture manual is going to be in April. And we'll be able to release that to you guys, and we'll work with your agencies individually to tailor that to your culture specifically. There are some generalities that we're going to take a look at, but we want to be able to help your agency specify that for an onboarding or educational tool within the work that you're doing. Okay, your turn again. Is there anything that you guys have any ideas or something that you want to try in your agency as one small quick step into continuous improvement using your data? And then, also let me know if you have questions, comments, or pushback about some of the things that we've talked about today.
No, but they did show up and started going through all your crap.
Sir?
I
Nothing? Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So you guys, thank you so much for today. Let me know that when you're ready to take your agency to a deeper level of performance management and continuous improvement, give us a call. We'll work something out. We'll come to you. We'll walk you through this process. When this session ends, a survey is going to pop up at the end. Please take that survey and let me know how we did and what we can do in addition to help your agency best serve the hardworking families of Wyoming. I appreciate you all. Thank you all so very, very much for coming, and do not hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions or you want additional information. I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Bye.